Some of the customs that appeared in Whoever Dies the Most Toys Wins later appeared in a 1998 magazine article that Gus Lopez wrote about my collecting, and he also talked about Whoever Dies the Most Toys Wins. Looking through boxes, I found a bunch of the figures that were in the front two rows of that photo. So I've reunited them all here for this shot. Interestingly enough, 8 of these figures, which were based on designs from the movie, were later made by Stan Solo, and yeah, I bought them all too, even though I'd already customized them. I was always really fond of this gray gonk droid. Now, admittedly, the angle in the magazine photo did not show off his details the best. You could see him better on the SWCA.com, more of a profile shot, but still that was blurry. So here's a more recent photo that I took when I found him in storage, and I was simply agog at how good the details are for hand painted on him. No way could I paint anything that well now. Of course, I had great reference to go from. This clip from the Making of Star Wars special, and I included this clip in a cut down video that I did 2 years ago entitled The Droids of Mos Eisley. I put him last because I was like, I really don't think he's in Mos Eisley. I think he's at the Lars homestead. Several weeks ago, Tom Spina confirmed this on a post on Facebook, but I have since found a slide from one of Tom Spina's shows about the cantina, and sure enough, that particular gray gonk was in Mos Eisley as well. So, whew, I don't have to rename that video after all. It was Jack Purvis inside the costume. Now, you might not know the name Jack Purvis, you might not know his face, but you have seen his work. He and Kenny Baker had a fairly successful vaudeville act called the Minitones back in the 70s. When Kenny was offered Star Wars, it meant he wouldn't be able to tour, and it meant Jack was going to be missing out on work. So he said, I can't take this role unless you have work for my partner. And as the story went, George Lucas said, don't worry, we'll always have plenty of work for Jack. So he's the Chief Jawa in Star Wars, and Ugnaught in The Empire Strikes Back, Tebow in Return of the Jedi, and lots of gonk droids, apparently.
Now, Jack!
So he's on the Death Star, he's at the Lars homestead, he's in Mos Eisley, he's also in the cantina. I clearly remember in the 80s, it was my neighbor Craig who suddenly said, oh my god, did you see that giant mantis back there? As we were watching the cantina scene. Considering this was on pan and scan, it's amazing he noticed it at all. It's actually slightly better visible in the work print, and also, as Tom Spina reminded me, in the Empire of Dreams documentary. I must have been 9 or 10 years old when I discovered at the Bookland downtown The Art of Star Wars. I didn't buy it immediately, but it just kept drawing my attention every time I went, and eventually somebody bought me a copy. And one of the images that I just really pored over was this John Mallow costume sketch for all the cantina denizens, including one marked Praying Mantis. Even though Mallow had X'd it out, you could still make out how it was supposed to be someone hidden under the skirt operating the skinny head and the forelegs. And right next to it, clearly the name Jackie Purvis. Sometime in the early 90s, I bought this Gigantics Praying Mantis model kit specifically to make the guy from the cantina, who we now know is a female named Kiddick Keed Kak. After assembling and painting the kit, I saw a picture of a prototype Death Star droid that Kenner had kit bashed, and I realized that's the literal kit they used for the head of the Death Star droid proto. So I mailed off my kit, had somebody recast the head for me, and made my own copy. Here's something I had forgotten until I was looking up the photos to use in this video. I actually got credited with that ID in a Ron Salvatore article about Star Wars concept models that Kenner had made. He gave me the title Star Wars Enthusiast. Now by this point you may have realized you already own a lot of action figures of characters played by Jack Purvis, but none of those show his face. However, 1 year after The Empire Strikes Back and 2 years before Return of the Jedi, both Kenny Baker and Jack Purvis appeared in Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits. And for once, they weren't hidden inside droid shells or wearing furry masks. And in my opinion, Jack Purvis gives one of the better performances in the entire film, especially in the scene where Kenny Baker's character dies. Oh, spoiler alert, 2 other Time Bandits would also go on to play Ewoks. Malcolm Dixon as Strutter would play an Ewok warrior, and Mike Edmonds as Og would go on to play Logray, the Ewok medicine man. He was also the puppeteer for the tale of Jabba the Hutt. Side note, Kenny Baker's character Fidget, I see a lot of people spell it with an E, but it is supposed to be Fidgit. So, not quite 4 years ago, when a company called Plastic Meatball brought out some Time Bandits figures, I was really hoping that we would eventually get an unmasked Kenny Baker, unmasked Jack Purvis, unmasked Mike Edmonds. They did do Og, but they did him when he's transformed into a pig. They've just now announced Wave 2. It will have been a full 4 years by the time I hold them in hand, and there's still no Wally figure. Yeah, we did get Fidget with a typo, but 4 years to get 2.5 of the 6 titular Time Bandits? How many decades am I going to be collecting this line before I've got a Wally? Not only do I want a Wally, I need one. I already bought a spaceship for him for the final battle scene where they've all got different vehicles from throughout time. Ah, well. Hopefully, if Wave 2 sells well enough, they'll rush Wave 3 out faster, and Wally will be one of the characters in that. On a side note about Jack Purvis, I've known this guy's name since I was very young. And my dad always had this rhyming phrase that he would use whenever a child or grandchild was climbing on something. He would say, "Get off the table, Mabel." And one day, when my kids were little, one of them was doing something, a little bit sketchy, and I saw them, but I didn't want to panic them, so I said kind of calmly, "Oh, you're making me nervous, Purvis." I guess it was the only name I could think of that rhymed with nervous. It stuck. I used that phrase for the longest time. Well, if you followed that tangent this far, you're very close to the end now. I just want to add a couple of quick thoughts about the figures seen in that photo at the beginning. This white protocol unit and black and white astromech, I really dug them after I customized them. I wanted to see their adventures more than like R2 and 3PO's. I think possibly because they were monochromatic and I'm colorblind. I don't know. Then there was the BGJ38 from Jabba's Palace that I customized after reading a Steve Sansweet article about a garage kit in his collection being mistaken for a prototype. So I just modified an 8D8 by cutting off the top portion of his head and gluing some craft beads to the side. But several years later, when Hasbro brought out the Build-A-Droid of BGJ38, I thought, wow, it's so simple to get an extra head. I could make him modern from the neck up and vintage from the neck down. So I cut off the head of my original custom and repainted his body to match the Hasbro plastic of the head. I not only customize figures, sometimes I customize my customs. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for watching.